The great court of Valora was a place where even sound seemed afraid to stay for long. Its floor was made of shining crystal, and its tall pillars reached so high they almost touched the sky window above. Dozens of alien nobles stood on both sides, their colorful robes glowing faintly in the light. They whispered to each other as the great doors slowly opened. Commander Kale stepped inside. He was tall for a human, broad-shouldered, wearing simple armor marked by many battles. His boots echoed with each step, and the sound filled the silent hall. He knew every eye was watching him, not with kindness but with suspicion. Humans were newcomers to this part of the galaxy, considered too young, too wild, and too quick to act without permission. Yet here he was, summoned to the royal court itself. At the far end of the hall stood the royal throne, made of silver branches that curved like a living tree. Princess Lysara stood before it, dressed in white and silver, her crown glinting softly. She was young, graceful, and known for her courage, but Kale could see something in her face that most others missed, a sadness hidden behind her steady gaze. The high speaker of the court, an elder with a voice like ringing bells, called out, "Commander Kale of Terra, you stand here as the chosen champion of Princess Lysara. Do you accept her call?" Kale's dark eyes moved from the speaker to the princess. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and though she stood tall, he noticed her fingers tremble. Something about her expression told him this was not just a formal request. This was something far heavier. He bowed slightly. "I accept." A ripple went through the court. Some of the nobles hissed softly. Others murmured in their strange languages. A human warrior standing as champion in the court of Valora. It was unheard of. The speaker raised a hand, silencing the whispers. "Then it is decided. The trial of strength will be held at dawn tomorrow. Commander Kale shall face the chosen challenger of the Threxian Dominion." At the mention of the Threxians, a deep growl moved through the crowd. They were a warlike people, large and fearsome, with skin like stone and 4 powerful arms. Kale had seen their kind before in battlefields where few humans survived. But Kale simply nodded. "Then I will be ready." The court was dismissed and the nobles began to leave. Kyle stayed where he was, his eyes still fixed on the princess. For a moment she hesitated, then walked toward him. Her guards followed closely, but they stopped a few steps away as she approached him alone. "You are brave," she said softly, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of a secret. Kale tilted his head. "I only did what was asked. But tell me, why me? There must have been warriors from 100 worlds willing to fight for you." Her silver eyes softened. "Because they would have fought for glory," she whispered. "I needed someone who would fight for what is right." Kyle studied her for a moment. There was fear in her words, fear that went beyond the coming battle. "What is it you are not telling me, princess?" he asked quietly. But she shook her head. "Not here. Too many ears listen." She turned and walked away, leaving Kale with more questions than answers. That night, Kale stayed in the guest quarters of the royal palace. The room was beautiful, with walls that glowed like starlight and a ceiling painted to look like the night sky of Valora. Yet Kale found no rest. He stood by the window, staring out at the floating city below. He thought about the princess, about her trembling hands and the sadness in her eyes. This was no ordinary trial. This was not just about proving strength. Something much larger was at stake, something that could decide the fate of 2 worlds. Kale placed his hand on the hilt of his blade. He had fought many battles, but this one felt different. Tomorrow he would face a Threxian in combat before the eyes of the entire court. If he won, the princess's honor would be defended. If he lost, she would be forced into an agreement she clearly feared. He breathed deeply, letting the thought settle. Whatever secret she carried, whatever danger lay hidden, he would fight with all he had. Not for glory, not for reward, but because somewhere deep inside, Kale knew she had chosen him for a reason, and he would not let her down. As the first lights of dawn touched the palace, Kale turned from the window. His mind was calm, his purpose clear. The trial of strength awaited, and so did the truth behind the princess's tears. Tomorrow, the court would see what it meant for a human to fight. The first rays of dawn turned the sky above Valora into gold and silver. Commander Kyle stood at the edge of the orbital arena, staring into the vastness of space. The arena floated high above the planet, a great circle of shining metal and crystal, its walls transparent so the galaxy could watch. Hundreds of noble ships hovered nearby, carrying the court, the royal family, and witnesses from across the stars. Kyle walked toward the center platform where the duel would take place. The air was cold and the silence felt heavy, as if the entire galaxy held its breath. Across the platform, a massive figure appeared, the Threxian challenger. The alien was huge, easily twice Kale's size, with 4 muscular arms and gray skin that looked as hard as stone. 2 glowing tusks curled from his jaw, and his eyes glowed faintly with a golden light. He carried 2 long axes, each one humming with energy. The crowd erupted with cheers and roars. The Threxian was a champion, undefeated in battle. Many believed Kale would fall quickly. Princess Lysara sat among the high nobles, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She kept her face calm, but inside her heart was racing. This was not just a fight for honor. This was her only chance to escape the binding agreement that would have forced her into a life she did not want. The High Speaker's voice rang out, amplified across the arena. This is the trial of strength. The champion who forces his opponent to yield shall win. No weapons beyond those agreed shall be used. No interference shall be allowed. Kale drew his weapon, a simple human-made sword of dark metal. It looked small compared to the Threxian's axes, but it felt perfectly balanced in his hand. He rolled his shoulders once, loosening his muscles. The speaker's voice thundered, "Begin!" The Threxian moved first, charging forward with surprising speed for his size. His axes swung in a deadly cross, aiming to crush Kale before he could react. Kyle stepped back, his boots sliding on the polished floor, and let the first strike miss him by inches. The second axe came from the side, and Kale ducked, feeling the rush of air as it passed. The audience gasped. Kale moved like water, fast but controlled. He struck once, aiming for the Threxian's side, but the alien blocked with one of his lower arms, the sound ringing like metal on stone. The Threxian snarled, pushing Kale back with raw strength. Blow after blow followed. The Threxian attacked with fury, his 4 arms a blur of motion. Kale stayed calm, letting instinct and training guide him. He waited for the right moment, letting the alien grow angry and impatient. Then it came, a swing that was too wide, too strong. Kale stepped inside the arc of the weapon, driving his elbow into the Threxian's chest. The giant stumbled back, surprised. Kale did not waste the opening. He struck again, this time slashing at one of the alien's arms. The cut was shallow, but it drew blood. The crowd shouted, half in shock, half in excitement. The Threxian roared and came at him again, but now his attacks were less careful, more desperate. Kale kept his breathing steady, dodging, blocking, striking only when he saw a chance. Slowly, the alien began to tire. His swings grew slower, his breathing heavier. Finally, Kale saw his moment. The Threxian raised both axes for a final crushing strike. Kale rolled to the side, came up behind him, and placed the tip of his sword at the alien's throat before he could turn. "Yield," Kale said quietly. For a long moment, there was silence. Then slowly, the Threxian dropped his weapons. The floor shook as they hit the ground. The High Speaker's voice filled the arena. "The human champion is victorious." The court erupted in sound. Some cheered, some shouted in anger, but no one could deny what they had just seen. A human had defeated a Threxian champion in fair combat. Kale stepped back and lowered his weapon. He bowed slightly toward his opponent, showing respect. The Threxian stared at him for a moment, then gave a slow, grudging nod before leaving the arena. Kale turned his gaze toward the royal box. Princess Lysara's eyes met his, and for the first time he saw her smile. Small, but filled with relief. When the trial ended, Kyle was escorted back to the court. Nobles filled the hall once more, this time louder than before, debating what the victory meant. Some called it a miracle, others a sign that humans were dangerous, but Kale said nothing. His part was done. He had won the trial. The princess's honor was safe, for now. And yet, as he stood in the great hall once more, Kale felt the same unease as before. The princess had smiled, yes, but her eyes still carried a shadow. Something about this victory was not the end of the matter. It was only the beginning. The royal palace was quiet that evening. The celebrations after the trial had slowly faded, and the court had gone back to its usual formal calm. Commander Kale stood on the balcony of his guest chamber, watching the floating gardens below. The city lights of Valora glimmered like a sea of stars beneath him, but Kale's mind was elsewhere. A soft knock came at the door. When Kale opened it, a palace guard stood there and bowed respectfully.
"Commander, the princess asks for you."
"She waits in the moonlit garden." Kyle nodded, sheathed his sword, and followed. The moonlit garden was one of the most beautiful places in the palace. A wide open space under a glass dome where plants from 100 worlds grew together. Moonlight from the planet's twin moons poured through the dome, turning everything silver and white. Princess Lysara stood near a fountain, her hands folded in front of her. She wore no crown now, only a simple gown, and for the first time Kale saw her not as a royal figure but as a young woman who had been carrying a heavy burden. "Commander," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the sound of flowing water. Kyle bowed his head slightly. "You asked for me, Princess." "I am here." She nodded but did not speak at once. Instead, she turned and looked at the fountain, watching the water ripple as if she were trying to gather her courage. "Today you fought for me," she said at last. "You faced a champion no one else dared face. And you won." Kale's voice was calm. "It was my duty." Lysara shook her head slowly. "It was more than duty. You could have refused when they summoned you. Most humans would have refused. Why did you accept?" Kale took a moment to answer. "Because I saw your hands trembling that day in the court. I saw that you were not just a princess calling for a champion. You were someone asking for help." Her silver eyes widened slightly. Then she lowered her head. "You are right," she whispered. "This trial was not about honor. It was about my freedom." Kyle stood quietly, letting her speak. "The Threxian Dominion did not challenge us for territory or power," she said bitterly. "They challenged because of me. They demanded I marry their prince as a sign of alliance. If I refused, they promised war. My father could not risk open war. Our people are still recovering from the last conflict. So they gave me a choice: accept the marriage, or win the trial of strength." Kale felt the weight of her words. He understood now why her eyes had held both fear and sadness. "So your victory today," Kale said slowly, "means you are free to refuse." "Yes." Her voice broke slightly, but she quickly controlled it. "But freedom has a price. The court will not let this pass quietly. They will insist that I choose a protector, a new champion to represent me. Many will argue that I should honor you, Commander, that I should bind myself to you as reward." Kyle's brows drew together. "And you do not wish that?" Lysara looked at him then, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "I do not wish to be bound to anyone by force. Not to the Threxian prince. Not even to the warrior who saved me. I wish to choose my own path in my own time." Kale stepped closer, his expression thoughtful. "Princess, I did not fight today for reward. I did not come here for glory. Humans fight for freedom, their own, and the freedom of those who cannot fight for themselves. Whatever the court decides, I will not claim you as prize." Lysara's breath caught. For a moment she said nothing, only stared at him as if she could not believe what she had just heard. "Then you are different from them," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "Every other warrior I could have chosen would have seen me as a trophy. But you—" Kale shrugged slightly. "I see you as someone who deserves to decide her own life." The princess turned away for a moment, and Kyle realized she was crying, quietly, silently. He said nothing, only waited. When she finally turned back, her tears were gone, but her eyes were brighter. "Tomorrow the court will meet to judge what happens next," she said. "They will expect you to speak. They will expect you to demand your right as victor." Kale nodded. "Then tomorrow I will tell them the truth." Lysara looked at him for a long moment, then gave the smallest, most grateful smile he had ever seen. "Thank you, Commander Kale. Whatever happens tomorrow, you have given me more than victory. You have given me hope." She turned and walked away, her gown trailing softly across the grass. Kale watched her until she disappeared into the shadows of the palace. When he was alone again, he looked up at the stars through the glass dome. Tomorrow would not be easy. The court would resist change. The rival kingdom would rage. But Kale had faced worse battles before. And this battle, the battle for one woman's freedom, was one he intended to win. The grand hall of Valora's court shimmered under crystal chandeliers as nobles from every corner of the galaxy gathered once more. The trial of strength had ended, but now a heavier matter awaited: the judgment of Princess Lysara's future. Commander Kale stood at the center of the room, his sword sheathed, his posture calm. The murmurs of the crowd rippled like waves, some whispering admiration, others skepticism. The high speaker's voice rang through the hall, carrying authority and echo. Princess Lysara has won the trial of strength. By tradition, the victor's reward must be offered. How does the princess wish to proceed? Lysara stepped forward, her crown glinting faintly in the soft light. Her gaze was steady, but her heart raced. She had won the trial, but the court would not easily accept her decision. She inhaled and spoke clearly. "I refuse any reward that would bind me," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I am grateful for the courage of Commander Kale, but my choice belongs to me alone. I will not be compelled into any agreement against my will." A ripple of shock moved through the court. Some nobles gasped audibly. Others leaned forward, whispering angrily to one another. The high speaker raised his hand, calling for silence. "It is unusual," he said slowly, "for a princess to refuse the reward of the trial. Many may argue that tradition demands you accept the human as protector, perhaps even more." Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. He looked at the assembly, his voice calm and strong. "Honorable nobles," he began, "I stand here not for glory, not for reward, and not for honor in the traditional sense. I fought today to defend the right of a woman to choose her own life. Commander Kale does not seek a bond with Princess Lysara. Humanity fights for freedom, not possession. She is not a prize to claim. She is a person with the right to decide her own path." The court fell silent. No one had expected the victor to speak in such a manner. Whispers of disbelief spread quickly. One noble, his robes shimmering like molten silver, stepped forward, his voice sharp. "This human insults our traditions. He rejects the reward that is his by law. What will you say to this, High Speaker?" The speaker's eyes met Kale's, and he nodded slowly. "Traditions are strong, but justice and honor are stronger. This human has spoken the truth. The princess has the right to choose her future. No force shall be used against her will." The room erupted into debate. Some nobles shouted in protest, citing the importance of following tradition. Others supported Kale's words, nodding and murmuring agreement. It was rare for the court to see such a division, and yet the logic was clear. Lysara had the right to freedom, and the human had proven his honor by refusing reward. Lysara stood quietly, observing the reactions. She felt relief, but also a strange new courage. Kale had risked himself not just in battle, but in front of the court. He had challenged centuries of expectation, and he had done it to protect her freedom. A representative from the rival kingdom of Threxia shouted from the balcony, "This is an insult. You dishonor the law of trials. The human must be claimed as victor." Kale's gaze did not waver. "I have no claim. The princess is free to decide. If your kingdom seeks war over honor, know that I will not fight for power, only to protect the innocent." Murmurs of respect passed through the assembly. Even the Threxian envoy paused, realizing that the human's courage and honesty were not to be dismissed. The speaker raised his hands. "Enough, the judgment is clear. Princess Lysara shall have the right to choose her protector and her path. The human warrior has proven his worth not by claiming reward but by honoring freedom." Kale stepped back, his duty fulfilled. He looked at Lysara, who now smiled fully, without fear or hesitation. The princess's eyes sparkled with gratitude, and she gave a subtle nod, acknowledging his courage and respect. For the first time, the court seemed to change its perception of humans. No longer were they seen as reckless, inexperienced newcomers. They were fighters who valued honor, courage, and freedom. As the session ended, nobles slowly began to leave, still debating, but with a new awareness of what humans could represent. Lysara approached Kale once the hall cleared. "You have changed everything," she said quietly. "Not just for me, but for the way the court sees your people." "I will never forget this," Kale bowed lightly. "I did only what any warrior should do. Protect those who cannot protect themselves and honor their choice. Today was yours, princess. Tomorrow is yours to decide." Lysara's smile grew brighter than the chandeliers above. "Then let tomorrow be the start of a new path. For me, for humans, and for Velora." Kale nodded, knowing the battle for freedom had succeeded, not just on the arena floor, but in the hearts and minds of all who witnessed it. And as he looked around the hall one last time, he realized that a single act of courage could change the course of history. The human warrior had spoken the truth, and it echoed across the galaxy. Freedom and honor were worth more than tradition, fear, or expectation. The sun of Valora rose like a glowing jewel on the horizon, casting warm light through the palace windows. The great court was quieter now, calmer than the day before. The judgment had been made and its echo still lingered in every corner of the city. Commander Kale stood near the royal spaceport, his ship prepared for departure. He had stayed longer than he expected, but his mission was complete. The princess was free, the court's decision was final, and the threat of forced alliance had been broken. Yet as Kale waited, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. This place, this trial had changed him. He had come only as a warrior answering a call, but now he was leaving as someone who had seen a people's heart and earned their respect. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. Kale turned to see Princess Lysara, dressed not in her royal gown but in a simple traveling cloak. She had dismissed her guards and carried only a small crystal in her hand, glowing faintly in the morning light. "Commander," she said softly, smiling. "Princess," Kale replied with a respectful nod. "I came to see you off," she said. "Yesterday the council signed the new treaty with Threxia. They have agreed to end their claim and open peaceful trade instead of war. Your victory has changed everything." Kale allowed himself a small smile. "Then it was worth the fight." "It was more than worth it," Lysara said, stepping closer. "You not only fought for me, you taught the court something it had forgotten. That freedom is not a gift given by rulers. It is a right. Because of you, they are already speaking of reforms, of letting people have more choice in their own lives." Kale listened quietly. He had fought many battles, but this was the first time his victory had shaped more than a battlefield. Lysara held out the glowing crystal. "This is a symbol of Valora's friendship with Terra. It is a star key. With it, your people will have open passage through our space. You will be welcome here, and not as strangers but as allies." Kyle accepted the crystal carefully. It felt warm in his hand, as if holding a piece of light. "Thank you," he said. "But I hope it is not only our ships that are welcome here. I hope one day humans and Velorans will walk side by side, not as guests, but as friends." "That day will come," Lysara said with certainty. For a moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of the wind and the distant hum of the spaceport. Lysara's expression softened. "You know," she said quietly, "when I first chose you as my champion, I feared I had made a mistake. Many in the court called you reckless, said humans could not be trusted with such honor, but you proved them wrong." Kale tilted his head slightly. "And yet you refused me before the court." A faint laugh escaped her lips, light and free. "Yes, and I am glad I did. Because in refusing you, I discovered who you truly are. You are a man who values freedom more than pride, and that is something no crown, no title, no tradition could ever take from you." Kale smiled faintly. "Perhaps that is what makes humans who we are." The moment stretched, then Lysara stepped back. "I cannot keep you here, Commander. Your people will need to hear what has happened." "Yes," Kale agreed. "And they will know that the galaxy is ready to see us as more than children. You have given us that chance." Lysara's silver eyes softened. "And you have given me my future. For that you will always have my gratitude." Kyle bowed deeply, the gesture one of true respect. "Then this is farewell, Princess." "Farewell," she said, her voice steady though her eyes shone with quiet emotion. Kale turned and boarded his ship. The engines hummed to life, and soon the vessel lifted from the platform, climbing higher into the sky. Lysara stood watching until it became only a speck against the stars. She did not cry this time. Her heart was lighter, her spirit unchained. The court had seen her tears once before, but now they would see her strength. She had chosen her own path, and no one would take that from her again. As Kale's ship vanished into the darkness of space, Lysara turned and walked back to the palace. The galaxy was changing, and she would be ready to guide her people into the future. Somewhere far beyond Valora's moons, Kale sat in the cockpit of his ship, holding the star key in his hand. He thought of the princess, of the court, of the choice she had been given, and chosen. Not bad for a first impression, he said to himself with a small smile. The stars stretched out before him, endless and bright. Humanity's journey had only just begun, and Kale knew as he set a course for home that one day he would return, not as a champion summoned by a princess, but as a friend welcomed by a world.